Hello everyone, and welcome to today's InsideLocal webinar. Thank you very much for sharing the time to sign up and to join us today. I trust the next hour is going to be full of fantastic advice and tips from our 4 expert panelists. And their topic that they'll be discussing today is powerful content creation ideas for local businesses. And we intend to kind of deep dive into that very, very quickly. Before we do, I just want to introduce you to the experts that you'll be benefiting from their wisdom today. Firstly, we have Don Campbell. And Don runs an agency called expandtoweb.com. He's also the founder of a reviews and ratings service called Get 5 Stars, which he started with Mike Blumenthal. So welcome to you, Don. Next we have Greg Gifford, who looks after all the internet marketing activities for autoreview.com and all their the hundreds and thousands of clients that they have in the US and Canada. Greg joined us on a recent webinar, so welcome back to Greg. We have Susan Hallam, who runs Hallam Internet here in the UK. Susan was also on a webinar with us back in 2014. So great to have you back again, Susan. And then we have Dave Ormond. Dave is the one panelist who hasn't got his webcam on today. Dave told me today that he's actually never sort of acted as a panelist on a webinar before. In his own words, he likes to keep himself sort of behind the scenes. So we're sure he's going to be more vocal, if not visual, in today's webinar. But a big thank you to the 4 of you for joining us today and for all that we're going to learn from you in the next hour. Working behind the scenes, as usual, we have Linda Bouquet from the Local Search Forum, who are the co-organizers of InsideLocal. We have Colin Nielsen from Impresio Marketing. They'll be looking after the kind of text questions that come through from our attendees. So a big thanks to them for all their efforts over the next hour. And then you have myself, and I run BrightLocal.com. We have a lot of our customers and users listening in today, so thank you everyone for taking the time to listen in. This is the agenda and topic list that we're going to run through. If you want to just scan your eyes down that, I'll leave it on the screen for 20 seconds or so to let you digest that. A few housekeeping things. Firstly, if you have got a question, do use the question module in your control panel. Linda and Colin will be on hand to answer questions, provide links to any resources that they think will be useful, or hopefully any resources that the panelists mention. If you want to tweet anything, please use the hashtag InsideLocal. And I've got a kind of local content idea list that I want to run past you attendees today. For those of you who've been on these InsideLocals before, we usually do some polls where we ask you to answer some questions and just sort of share your thoughts about a particular topic or question. But we're not going to do that today. We're going to try something different. Given that we're going to have 300-400 people listening in, people who work every day or every week kind of creating local content and working with local businesses about their kind of local content on their sites, I'd really like to try and create the ultimate list of local content ideas. And I'm hoping that you'll help me do that by offering up 1 or 2 suggestions of ideas for local content that you use on any of your customers. And as an example, it might be that you write about local meetups or local events or local things that happen in the kind of local space, spaces that you think you create great local content which allows Google to understand your location better. What I'm hoping is that you'll use the question module to share some of those ideas. We'll create a great list and then we'll publish it out on BrightLocal, and also Linda will publish it on the Local Search Forum. If we use your idea, we'll give you an accreditation next to it. And what we really want to create is a really fantastic resource of local content ideas that people that are operating in local search or local business owners across the US, across the UK, across the world can look at that and say, okay, there are 40, 50, 60 ideas here that I can go and publish content for. And that would be a great resource they keep coming back to and will help to benefit everyone who works in this fantastic industry day in, day out. So please use a question module to post that. If you're going to post a little suggestion idea, please put the word idea at the start so that when we're kind of going through the questions and the comments at the end, we can kind of hone in on those ones and pull those into our local content idea list. So thank you for everyone who does participate with that. That'll be a really fantastic resource that we create. So before we look at the first agenda item, I wanted to sort of put down some kind of assumptions for what we're going to be assuming about the kind of the conversation today. So we're just going to assume that everyone knows that content is important. So we can get over that first question, of why create content. We want to assume that that localizing content is also important for local businesses. We want to also assume that the site structure that you're working on is in decent shape, a site has a CMS, any of those kind of structural flaws that might stop you creating great content or publishing content or sharing that content. Those things are all fine. You haven't got to kind of worry about those. We just want to focus on kind of advanced content creation ideas and tips and suggestions and kind of practical points of view that our panelists have got. So hopefully those assumptions sit kind of clearly and are understood by everyone, and hopefully that allows us to kind of dive deeper into the agenda items. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was what are the true objectives of online content? And when I was thinking about putting the agenda together, what I want to understand here is what is it when you're coming up with content suggestions for a customer? What is it that you really want to achieve? What are the true objectives when you take away some of the peripheral ones or the ones that might be distracting? What are the things that you really want to achieve with the content you create? And Susan, as your fellow Brit, I'm going to come to you first with that. What are you really trying to achieve with the content that you create?
Well, I have to say you're a little bit cheeky, Miles, because you may notice that I'm not originally a Brit, but I'm a British citizen now, by the way. I would say in terms of creating content, I think a really good word to keep in mind is going to be trust. So what we need to be doing is generating the kind of content that might be trusted, say, by your customers, might be trusted by other content publishers who are going to find it interesting, and indeed that Google is going to trust. So if we look back in terms of local SEO and some of the most important signals in terms of ranking well, your domain authority is a really important part of that. So if we're going to be creating trustworthy content, then lo and behold, you're going to get all this virtuous circle of inbound linking in terms of people sharing your content, in terms of people interacting with your content. So by creating great content, so if the objective is to generate great content, you will get the resulting benefits. I think the big problem is if what people think is all I want to do is get links, then you're barking up the wrong tree. So I would say that the real objective, if we're trying to actually improve our rankings, drive more traffic, drive the right kind of visitors, I would also argue any idiot can drive traffic to a site. What we want is we want the right kind of traffic, then we need to be generating the right kind of content. So I would say the true objective is trust and quality.
Great, that's very interesting, Susan. Thank you for that. Greg, same question to you. What objectives do you hold pure and true when you're thinking about creating content?
When we're talking to, we work with all auto dealers, and when we're talking to them, the thing that we always try to really hammer home is that the content has to be useful. Because, like Susan said, you're trying to build up that signal of trust, and if the content's not useful, then there's going to be no trust associated with it. And there are far too many businesses and websites out there that hear, oh, content equals SEO success, and they just push out crap after crap after crap posts, and it does nothing for them, and it junks up their site. And so we always tell people, you've got to take a step back and look at the content, and is it really useful? Does anything that you put on your site needs to provide an answer to a question that a customer might have, or provide value to the customer experience of your site? So if that content you're pushing out doesn't do that, then it's pointless to waste your time doing it.
Although I would suggest that usefulness, I would agree with you, Greg, on the one hand, usefulness is important, but don't you think there are other things that could, so I think also for some really local campaigns to put things that are personal, where you're celebrating other people's success, where you're name-checking things. So sure. Usefulness is one strategy.
That's still useful, though. Like you're when I say useful, maybe that's oversimplifying, but the content needs to serve a purpose when it's on your site, as opposed to, in that example, you're talking about some charity work that you did. Maybe that's not useful to your business objectives, but it's useful for people to be able to see what kind of company you are and what sort of business you are. Whereas if you're just churning out content that says, Denver divorce attorney, Denver divorce attorney, Denver divorce attorney, just to get in as many keywords as you can stuff, that's pointless.
Is it a case of I'm going to use the word genuine, not as in genuine as in unique, but genuine as if it comes from the right place,
right,
in terms of where you're publishing it from? Is that a way that might cover off both of those, useful and trusted?
Mm-hmm. And the other word I like to use, Miles, is the word authentic.
Yep.
And I think Greg's made a good point that things like corporate social responsibility, participating in the local community, being aware of these kind of true local issues is going to give you those kind of quality signals again.
Okay. Don, bring you in on this as well. These guys have talked about, I guess, I don't know how you describe them, but how about maybe sort of harder objectives, the kind of KPIs you might attach to content? Is that something that you look at when you're creating content for your customers?
Yeah, I so certainly agree with Greg and Susan on this whole, making this content useful and trusted. I mean, I'm really big on that. I think a lot of people, as they mentioned, they get a little caught up in just, I need to create content, I need to create content. And you see a lot of people trying to take shortcuts, and I just think, the thing about content and links is there are no shortcuts. That's the problem. And people are always looking for a shorter, faster, easier way to do these things. And I think that I like to look at it more in terms of, this is my marketing budget, right? It's going to take time and it's going to take money, but let's look at it in those terms that it's worth it. It's worth it to take that time and money, especially if I have these kind of objectives in place. And I'm a big one myself on making useful content. I think that's so important to create that trust with people because they're learning from you. And there's this really interesting YouTube video. It's called Marketing by Sharing by Jason Fried. And in this, it's like a 15-minute video, and he's doing a presentation about how he talks about how he was learning to cook. He was really into learning to cook, and he was watching some cooking shows. And what he discovered is that as he was watching these chefs, he would be really interested in what pans they were using and what tools they were using. And then he would go buy those tools. And it's because he was learning from these people, he sort of developed this sort of almost trust relationship. And he was like, I try to approach them. I went in 37 Signals. They make Basecamp, very successful company. You guys probably heard of them. But that's the approach that they took, is like, we're just trying to share everything we know out there on our blog. And then we build relationships with people that way. So I don't know if I have necessarily KPIs, but in terms of objectives of content, I think about, how do we create this useful content that people can learn something from and then get to know me, and it certainly has worked on Expand to Web too. But I also think of it in terms of, if you do that, then you sort of naturally get the benefits of like people linking to that content. And you also, the other thing, like especially with small business owners that I find, is so many of the websites are just generic, right? And what they're missing is that personal touch that Susan talked about a little bit, where, who are you and why did you start this business and what's unique about it? And I think, that's the conversion. So even if you rank well, if someone comes to your site and it's just another generic website with no pictures on it, you don't know who the person is who's selling this stuff, then it's just not really going to work anyway. So I always think of content as being, educating people to build that relationship, and then when they do get to my website, I want them to find things that, anyway, I think it's important to have that. Short of KPIs, I'm thinking, building the links and getting the conversions, it happens naturally if the content is good.
Okay, that's great. That's a really lovely start. And I'm going to move on to the next.
Can I just add one thing really fast about KPIs? Because if we talk hard measures, can I just give,
sure.
I think as Don was saying really quickly, if we're looking at really good KPIs for content, I've got 4 that we tend to use most typically.
Okay. Fine. Yep.
Does it generate inbound links? And we actually report back to clients, what links are we getting to this content? B, is it getting what's called amplification? So that means, are people sharing it? Are they sending it out? Is it extending reach? Good content will get that. Links, amplification. The other thing that we're looking for would be conversation. So are people replying to it? Are they commenting on it? Are they engaging with it? And the final thing that we would be looking at is the measure called applause. And that means, are they liking it? Are they, so I think there are specific, really hard measures, numbers. So we can go quite soft on the quality thing. I don't want to give people the wrong impression on the webinar that we're just talking about quality. We're also talking about these hard KPIs it needs to generate.
Susan, do you think those KPIs would apply to, I think there's some content on a small business owner's website that probably isn't going to get shared a whole bunch or amplified across the internet, yet it's still really important as people come to that website to find out who they are and want to buy from them. I mean, I think that not all content can necessarily be measured with those KPIs. I totally agree those are good KPIs. I'm just saying that not everything should be measured that way.
Indeed, and I think there's a big segment on the internet of people that I would call lurkers, and that means they're going to appreciate consuming your content, but they're not necessarily going to interact with it.
Right.
But I still think in terms of this kind of content, what other people say about you in the form of either links or in terms of comment or engagement, what other people say about you is more important than what you say about yourself. So what we need to do is we need to get this other, it's the others, the otherness, if that makes sense, that really leverages the value.
Mm-hmm.
Can I add something?
Yes, please.
Okay, I really, first of all, this is great, I'm learning. Words like content, trust and usefulness. What I like to touch on is intent. And with intent, what we're thinking about is where are the buyers coming from, what are their buying motivations? Okay, and then when we're creating content, we want to be able to tie in some of these ideas, like trust. The businesses have to be trustworthy. What they're providing has to be useful. And we want to tie it into what we think or what we've learned is intent. And we want to weave all of that together to try and create a story that's more attractive and applies to where they're coming from and trying to respond to what might be the buying perspective. And then secondly, I frankly, I'm taking notes. Real interesting. I like the KPIs. I'm not sure if that applies all across the board. That might be great for larger businesses. In our cases, we actually own in various combinations rather small businesses, variety. They're very small. They're sort of mundane. We don't get a lot of commentary. We wish we did. We work at it at times. So sometimes those are real interesting, and I love them. I'm always looking for links. I'm looking for comments. We scan through all sorts of social media. We just don't get a lot, and we work at it, but we're under the radar screen.
Dave, is your objectives more than about conversion? Is that what you define as what you want to do?
Every business, and they're different, and they're all relatively small. We're always thinking about conversion all the time. We're also thinking about it on an immediate term basis and also a long-term basis. Every single business, yes. We're very focused there.
Do you think you can convert from every page on your site? Or do you think there are some pages that actually you shouldn't try and convert too hard on?
For us, we don't try and convert on every page. We are creating some content for other reasons. Some of them have to do with links. Some of them are really going out to other communities. So no, we're not trying to convert on every page. And we've put pages out there that we've learned are not conversion pages. They're information pages. And so we've gotten rid of them over time, or we've adjusted them. But no, at least that's not our experience.
Okay. Susan, you talked about some harder KPIs. Do you have sort of benchmark targets that you say, okay, for each bit of content, this is the number of shares you want to get, this is the kind of application, these are the links we want to get, and do you then sort of factor that back in a sort of feedback loop to the next bit of content you produce so that you can sort of optimize and hone the kind of content plan that you might have?
Oh, you do ask a lot of questions at once, Miles, don't you? Okay. First question would be do we have KPIs? And yes, and there's and the first a free tool that might be worth mentioning in a webinar like this. We do use a service called BuzzSumo that I'm sure that you're all aware of. And what this does is it allows you to look at your content to see what kind of traction it's getting. And I think these benchmarks, the best benchmark for most small businesses and larger businesses, to be honest, is your own performance. And are you actually improving your own performance over time? So we might take a look at that, and then based on what we can see, what is generating links. We also do, obviously, the other KPI we haven't mentioned, which I would have thought is our most important KPI for local content, would be rankings. So if we're targeting a particular key phrase, are you getting the rankings you need? We jumped into the conversion part of the conversation, but the word that we also need to be saying is the word acquisition. People need to discover you before you can convert. So if we were to use one of our KPIs, where are they in terms of these pages? Obviously, it's difficult to know where you rank. I believe the concept of ranking, to be frank, is irrelevant. Rankings are personalized. Greg's going to get different results to David, is going to get results to me. But what we do know is what page is the page acting as a landing page. Your final question is, what do we learn from this and how do we apply it? Well, there you go. In your content marketing strategy, you try to find what kind of pages are driving traffic, what kind of pages are generating the conversions, and boy, you learn from that. Test, learn, test. I think from content marketing, test, learn, test.
Okay, great. I think that is a wonderful, wonderful sort of first salvo at this topic. So thank you, all of you, for that. That's great. Let's look at the content creation process now. Greg, going to come to you. Do you have a set process that you work through for each and every customer? How strict are you about it? How loose? How does it work for you?
Well, since we only work with auto dealers, it's fairly easy for us because a lot of it, I wouldn't say that it's just cut and paste cookie cutter because, you know, you've got Ford dealers or Chevy dealers or used car dealers or whatever, but the general idea is the same. And so we know that as far as the content we're going to create, there's basically three kinds of content that we do. So one type of content is the kind of ancillary automotive content. Typically it's a, you know, do-it-yourself maintenance tips. So it's things that apply to their customers that their customers find useful related to autos. For our RV dealers and motorcycle dealers, it's places to take, you know, your new vehicle on a road trip. Then there's the local content where, you know, kind of what everybody's talking about in the questions of localized content, you know, lists of best restaurants in the town, things about your city, community events, things like that. And then the final section is, you know, specific events that are happening at the dealership. So if there's a, you know, Memorial Day sale or President's Day sale or whatever that would be, then you're going to have content related to the events and things, you know, golf tournaments, things like that that are going on at the dealership. So we try to find out about those events far enough ahead of time that we can fit them into the content schedule, and then we're typically creating our content schedule. We're usually about 4 or 5 months ahead of where we actually are, so that we're planning everything out so that we know, okay, hey, we can get this content created. We know this is when it's going to go up. Here's how we're going to need to share it. And so we look at everything kind of cohesively far enough in advance that we've got time to roll with the punches and create graphics, create videos, PDFs, anything else we need to do.
Okay, great. Thank you, Greg. Dave, going to come to you. You obviously work on a number of different types of businesses as opposed to Greg, who works, you know, in a sort of specific vertical. How does your content creation process work?
First of all, I enjoyed listening to Greg. I spent a little time working with a large auto dealer with a lot of different locations. The scope of what they were doing was so massive compared to our little businesses. I think their total revenues are like $500 million in the U.S. And all our little businesses, you know, add them all together and it's probably less than one of their big dealerships. So the scope and how we're doing things is very different. Anyway, what we try and do with each business is come up with a series of ideas that would be engaging, intriguing, that would expand the sort of humdrumness of a local business, and then create something around it that is going to be compelling. And when we're doing this, we're actually, this is when we're really thinking about links or shares or other things or rankings. This is outside of the norm of this is what we do and kind of things. And we do create all of that, and that works for us. So we'll read, we'll talk, we'll sort of discuss things. We discuss things with associated businesses and associated entities, and we just ideas pop up, And then we work through those ideas to try and create the best ones and the best scenarios. And then we are working several months in advance to create some things of quality. And we're trying to create really shareable, interesting topics for what are primarily humdrum smaller businesses that do repetitive things again and again and again and are very localized. And we've had some successes and we've had some failures with some of that also. But we keep doing it. It's a repetitive process again and again and again and again. It's the best way I can describe it.
How do you balance you mentioned quality there. How do you balance the desire or the need to publish frequently with the need to also publish quality articles that take more time to research, etc.? How do you balance those two?
Okay. For these businesses, quality and frequency are at opposite ends. We can't do both. What we can do is create updates on news. That's frequency. Here's what we're doing now. Here's what we're doing now. Here's something new now. But those are for customers. Those are updates. Those are newsworthy. They're small items, but they keep things changing all the time, so that our sites are changing, and they're real. It makes them very real. But then the different pieces are pieces where we're trying to break out of the mold of a small business and get larger attention. And in each entity, each business, we do something very, very different. And we have found niches in each case, but it's taken a lot of work. So there are two different types of things.
Yeah. Are you able to sort of share what sectors your businesses are in? Just so that we understand.
The one business that I went public on was bartending school, and specifically one of them. It's located outside of Washington, D.C. Now, the ultimate reason that I went public on that is one of the topics that we decided to share on was SEO and local SEO. And frankly, I've been doing it since probably around 2003 or 2004 for all the businesses. This is the one where we started articulating about SEO. And all of a sudden, after commenting a long while and being involved locally, sort of being a gadfly more than anything, I started actually tying the business URL to those comments, and it was real stuff. I mean, we were never making up stuff. And frankly, it was really more for the SEO. It's for the SEO community. It's not for potential local bartenders or bars that are going to hire people. And it's worked. Now, that's what we've done. And we've done it in totally different areas.
Great. I thought it would be very useful for everyone to really kind of picture the sort of businesses you work in. Susan, I'm going to come to you. Still thinking of the kind of content creation process.
Yeah.
Who has the responsibility for content creation? Does it sit with you as the sort of search partner, search agency, or do you put that on to your customers to create content for themselves?
Really good question, Miles. Can I just rewind one tiny step in terms of how our process works? And I'd like to go back to the original point that David made, is when you're looking at a content creation process, our starting point would be what's called a persona. To whom are we speaking, and what kind of content do they want? So you need to be able to understand exactly who the audience is. So in terms of the kind of clients we work with, they might be solicitors or lawyers, they might be estate agents, they might be hotels. Each of these kind of audiences have different requirements, so you're tailoring the content. We do have on our website available something called a content grid, and in this we map who are our target markets, what kind of content do they need. And I'll have a word with Linda, who's, by the way, putting some great notes into the chat section, and maybe we can add some more information there in terms of this content grid. But to answer your question, whose responsibility is it? This is a pain in my side as an agency. It's really hard to create great content. So what we try to do is come up with ideas that we think are going to suit the target market, to reflect the intention. But ultimately, it's the client who's got to sign it off and to agree with it. Greg and Don, I don't know what you guys think, but creating this content with clients is a very, very difficult thing because the client also wants to keep ownership of it, as they should. I think the highest quality content, by definition, has to come from the client. An agency, we can do the best we can, but the agent, the client's got to be involved.
Yeah.
Well, especially because the client has so much more intimate knowledge of their specific business and what they do. And somebody in the questions was asking that a second ago about, how do you create content when the client doesn't feel like it's valuable to provide that information to you? And, the best you can do is do some research and, like you said, Susan, do the best that you can do as an agency. But ideally, that's part of why we talk to all of our dealers and try to find out far in advance, is so that the car dealers are busy and it's tough to get them on the phone to find out what's going on. So we just keep bugging them way early so that we can have time to say, okay, look, we've got this event or this thing that we need to put some content out about. We need to get that information from you. You've got to help us with this, or it's not going to work.
Yeah, at Expanded Web we have a membership group, and I'd say the #1 problem that everyone has, where the website, like I'm thinking about small businesses building a website, it always breaks down at this point, almost every time, right? Is that you start working with the client and you're asking, you need to know, like, what is the about page? What are the products you sell? What's different about your business? And it always stops here. Miles, if I could share my screen, I just have a technique that we've used that I want to just show, like 2 slides really quick, that we found to be really effective to help with this kind of problem. All right, can you see my the interview, this slide that I'm showing?
Yes.
Okay. So Tom was asking about this, and I think Greg mentioned it too. Is like he said, people are too busy. The businesses are too busy to provide this, and so we found this process to work really well. I call it the interview, but it's essentially like a 30-minute discovery interview. And the problem is, you get into the situation where the client agrees to write down a few things, but they never do because they're just really busy running their business. So what we'll do is we'll get together with them and say, schedule like a 30-minute meeting, and it'll be either whoever's building the website, or it could be a copywriter to do this. But we have a list of questions that we walk them through, and we send this over in advance. It's just a list of 10 questions, and then we get on this meeting, and it's either an in-person meeting at a coffee shop, or it could be over Skype or the phone, and you record this meeting. So it's 30 minutes, and you kind of preset those expectations up front. And if you're in the coffee shop, you just get out your iPhone or your Android and you put it on record. If you're using Skype, you can use Call Recorder, or if you're on the phone, there are ways you can do that. I'm forgetting the name of the service, but there are services that you can do that with, and you obviously tell them you're recording it. But the idea is you're going to walk through these questions with them, and then you're going to have a 30-minute recording that captures all this stuff. And the type of questions we ask are things like, what does your business do? Who is your customer? How long have you been in this business? What did you do before that? Why did you start your business? What do you enjoy the most about it? What makes it different from similar products? And what we've found is that when you walk through these questions, it's amazing the conversation that you get into every single time, because it all comes pouring out of like why they started this business and what they love to do, and that is all captured. And I've got the link here if you want this. It's just a Google Doc with these 10 questions in it. But I can hand the screen back to you now, Miles.
Okay, great, thank you.
How do I?
I'm sure
let me
Linda.
add.
Can you pull it back?
Let me add something.
Okay.
We are Don's clients. We are the type of businesses that would be Don's clients. Those are great questions. We go through them ourselves, and it's something like that, trying to create content. We have to go into those questions. We're the ones that know the answers, but we have to ask the questions themselves. That's a great process.
It works so well because you think about now you've got this 30-minute conversation where the business owner has told you all these things, and you can get a copywriter to take that and you create the about page on the website. You can create a product page. You can create meet the doctor page if it's whoever it is, and you've captured now some of the. Now obviously this isn't like the killer content that everyone's going to link to, but this is the essential content that every small business website has to have that makes it unique and stand out, and it describes like why this person went into the business in the first place. And I think that breaks through that barrier, and it's really been useful for us.
I've got another question. I might put this to Greg. I mean, creating content can be a pretty expensive process. I mean, I know that because we create a lot of content here, and it can be expensive. What is the key to kind of creating, content at a cost-effective level so that you keep costs down, margins for yourself, it works for the customer? What do you think the key for cost-effectiveness is?
You've got to streamline your process and be as efficient as possible. And again, with us, because we're all automotive, it makes it a little bit easier because we don't have to have these massive brainstorming sessions and massive research sessions to figure out more about a niche. For us, it's all automotive, and there's going to be little things different between types of inventory, but as far as content goes, you just get it really honed in and say, here's exactly what we need to do, here's how much time it needs to take, here are the assets we need for this, here's the research that needs to be done. I know I'm actually friends with a guy that has a company called CopyPress, and there's other services like that out there where you can get pretty decent blog posts done for $50. You can pay $75, $100 to a lot of these services and get a really awesome, well-researched post. And not that you want to outsource everything, but depending on the scale of what you're doing, and if it's a really small business and you're trying to do this stuff yourself, a lot of times you just don't have the ability to run your business and do your website and do all these things. And so if you can find a good solution for outsourcing your blog post that does all the ideation, and that can be really useful. So there's a lot of different ways that you can make it affordable, but I'm kind of talking a lot about the same thing. You just got to be really efficient and streamline your process. Sure thing.
Susan, do you make use of any external writers or sort of services such as that?
Well, if the question originally is how to do this in a cost-effective manner, I find for us the most cost-effective is if you can invest in a really high-quality piece of content that I would call evergreen content. You can get a huge amount of mileage out of it. So as an example, we created something called a digital marketing map. And that has provided us with, and again, it could be local to a city, it could be local, but by creating this one asset, you can get multiple posts out of it. You can get multiple interactions out of it. Even like a webinar like today, you could be, and I'm sure, Miles, you'll be putting this on the website. You might then put a separate piece of content, which is all the lovely suggestions that hopefully the audience are contributing in terms of their content ideas. So I think by starting with a brilliant, one single brilliant idea, if this makes sense, could then generate loads of content so that you could keep putting this fresh content onto your website. Personally, we never outsource to any article marketing services, but I think that perhaps has to do with the sectors that we operate in. Again, if we're looking at things like estate agents, if we're operating in things like solicitors and lawyers, the content has to be authentic and genuine, and when you start to outsource it, people can smell the fact it's just not significantly on brand. Yeah.
And then you lose that trust right off the bat. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. So you think it can be suitable in some cases, but not others, depending on the nature of the business. Plumbers, for example. Do you think plumbing, you could get away with something that is maybe not written by the brand because actually it could be a generic topic?
Why don't we use the example locksmiths? There's another good one to use as well, isn't it? I don't know what the guys think, but as an agent, well, again, I'm going to have to get off my high horse, but as an ethical agency, we just do not outsource this content ever, ever.
Yeah, but in the situation I was talking about, if it's a locksmith and he's busy and he's always out running around unlocking people's houses and cars and stuff, he may not, if he doesn't have an agency to do his stuff for him, but he knows it's important, he may have to rely on an outsourced service like that. And, if that's what it is, then, it can be okay, but it's still, just like Susan said, it's not going to be as good as an authentic post from that business owner that truly understands, and it has that same voice that you can tell this guy really wrote this. But it's better than using an outsourced source is better than not doing content at all.
And I think there's a happy medium there. Like the fact is, a lot of business owners are simply not going to write content for their website. As much as you beg them or strong arm, they're not going to do it. And so I think if you can do something like this interview where it's still coming from them and you have a decent copywriter, not an article marketing service, but a decent copywriter that can take that now and turn that into something that they can then have the business owner review and edit, then you have something that's still authentic. So I think it's possible, but somewhere in the middle, I guess, it's not. I don't know. I think some people just aren't going to write. They're not good writers, or they're not confident, or they're just too busy to write their own stuff.
I think Don's idea is the best one that's come out of the whole webinar in terms of simply recording what people have to say. And off the top of my head, I know there are services that you can then send them the sound file, and they will transcribe it into text. Well, lo and behold, look at the assets you've got. You've got the sound file. You could have then the written text, which by definition is going to be keyword rich, because a business owner is going to use all the semantic language and all the local language that corresponds to his business. It's going to be original. I mean, Don, I think that just gets my gold star for the evening, to be perfectly frank. Yeah.
Thanks.
I think we should end the webinar now, I think. We'll end it now. It's not going to get any better than that.
Come on, let's give some gold stars.
Sarah, in one of the guests was saying that they use this process too, and it works really well for them. So.
Guys, I'm going to also. So, Dave, can I move on to this? We've got about 20 minutes left. We've got a lot to cover. I'm going to come to actual fact. The next one I want to look at is it's kind of beyond words. So, we've talked a lot about text content. And Susan, you mentioned this webinar, for example, which is certainly part of our content marketing plan. Let's look at use of videos, graphics, photos, whatever it may be, kind of beyond text. Dave, in your content work that you do you look to kind of utilize these other kind of content forms, and how do you utilize them? What's your sort of favorite that you like to utilize?
Well, number one, we have to talk to a lot of people. We try and get a lot of ideas from a lot of people. Better ideas come from a variety of interactions. As we're creating content, trying to come up with things, and we work our way through a lot of things, and the ideas get cleaner, better, they get improved through working it through a variety of people. It's also because we're working with a couple of totally different types of businesses. We're in the design business. That's, these businesses are as different as night and day. Totally different people involved. Anyway, as we're developing content, something that's bigger and richer, something that tries to get back to the KPIs that Susan was speaking about initially, and that's different from the About Us page and our services pages and things like that. Then we are taking ideas, starting at the top with ideas, thinking about who our audiences are, and working through a variety of different types of presentations. What's going to be most attractive? An infographic, pictures, video, you name it. It's got to be much richer than written content. And we're really trying to create very big ideas. And we are starting from very small places. But we've actually managed to do that on occasion. And it's a lot of effort for us. I think we're only able to do it because we cover multiple businesses. So we're able to, go ahead.
What value does, say, having these other types and forms of content on your site versus text bring to you? What value do they bring that words just can't?
Well, they're vivid. They're livelier. They're they can create emotion, and they're richer. They're shareable also. So they're just more interesting and compelling to readers. We've also failed on content. Let me just say this. We have taken our shots and it hasn't worked at times. And that's, c'est la vie. I can't, what more can I say? I'll give you an example. We had, and I use this business, the bartending school. We have military people who take this program. Some are in the military, some have retired. The one in D.C., in Washington, D.C., is also an area where a lot of executive military people retire to, and then they go into, they become government contractors. Well, we had one of those officers retire and take our class and want to become a bartender. And then he was describing why and the whole process. His emotional response was so fascinating and so interesting and so different, and it was rich. He was doing this for his lifestyle, and he actually enjoyed it. So when he read about that, when he started describing it, we said, boy, this is a rich story. Also, it's rich for a potential blogging community, because the military blogging community is very rich in its own right. So we got him to write more and more about it. Then we tested it in front of somebody in that community we knew, and he thought, boy, this is great. Not that it was overwhelming, but it was just a really rich response to life. And then at the end, he decided not to put his name to it, and he didn't want pictures for his personal reasons, and we respected that. And so we spent a lot of time working on this, and it didn't work. It didn't work.
Okay.
That's.
But that does happen. Don, you wanted to jump in and say something a second ago.
Well, I was just going to say, to Dave's point, I think you were asking how do these other rich assets like photos and videos and things and graphics help? Well, universal search results, right? I mean, you can get multiple placements on the first page with this. And one low cost, Kevin was asking for a low cost idea because sometimes these get expensive. One technique that we've used that has worked really well is to talk to the business owner and find out what are your key procedures that you're trying to attract. What are your best ones? So for a dentist, maybe that's Invisalign, or for a chiropractor, maybe it's like active release technique, or whatever it happens to be. And we'll have them like just do an interview, create a slideshow, just a short slideshow about this, and turn that into a video, okay? And put a soundtrack on it. And you can do all this for about $120. And we have, I've found a lot of people that are good at this that will create this video, and it educates them. What is active release technique? What is Invisalign? Answer the common questions, because the business owner knows this. They know what questions people ask about Invisalign or braces or whatever it is. Like, oh, Invisalign, does that mean I have to keep them in my mouth? How do I eat? How many hours a day? Is this truly an alternative for braces? There's all these questions people have. You put that in a slideshow that educates, back to Greg's point earlier. Turn that into a video, upload it to YouTube. Now you've got a YouTube video. You create a blog post on the website that embeds and summarizes that video. Now I've got a blog post, and I've got an image that I use to cover it. So now I have like all these different types, and you can see when someone types in Invisalign in Cupertino, then I've got like 2 or 3 chances at being on that first page in the search results. And it works really well, especially in non-competitive markets, but even in competitive markets. So I think taking advantage of the universal search results can really help you out. Help get more placement, more ranking, and it's creating content that educates and that does it in different ways than just text.
Okay, Susan, Christopher, do you kind of create any videos or graphics? Do you ever see do you get different types of response from customers? Do you find that you get more conversion or more sharing from utilizing different formats?
Absolutely. These different kind of formats will assist in what's called the customer journey and can provide different touch points. Today I was working with a business, a manufacturer, but they have retail outlets locally. And what they found is by creating video content on a local basis, what they wanted to do is they found that customers want to feel connected to the local business. So this kind of content, as you suggested, will get rankings for the acquisition process, but they will also strongly assist with the conversion process. So having this kind of content, I also think if this section of the webinar is about rich media in terms of illustrations and the like, this is the perfect kind of content for what we would call boring businesses. So a lot of businesses say, oh, I've got a boring business. This kind of rich content is absolutely perfect. How-to guides. How do these things work? How do I fit the lock on the door? How do I do these kind of things? How do I filter my swimming pool correctly? So for all these businesses that provide local services, this kind of how-to content, on the one hand, I hate to keep coming back to it, you're building trust. I'm going to tell you how to filter your swimming pool, but ultimately you're going to need my service anyway. And now you're going to trust me because I've created this content for you. So I think this rich content, again, if provided it's of the right quality, which as Don suggested, doesn't mean it has to be expensive, but it just has to be genuine and authentic. So even if it's me standing by the side of my pool showing how something works, it could be absolutely perfect, especially for conversions, as you suggested, Miles, yeah.
Okay, that's great. I mean, do they meet kind of different kind of goals and different kind of KPIs for you? I mean, do you find that, text content establishes better local rankings, but having a video or an infographic gets you more links? And do you kind of factor those aspects into thinking what type of content am I going to create for this particular topic?
Yeah, and I think as you suggested, if we keep going back from a local SEO point of view, if what we need to keep in mind is domain authority. So it's all about my domain authority. Provided I have great, strong domain authority, even as a small business in my local sector, I can then keep putting these articles on. The text articles are going to rank well by virtue of the fact that the search engines, trust my site to generate great content. We can then be leveraging the higher quality content in the form of the infographics. So I find infographics, in our experience, drives the highest number of inbound links. They're going to get references, they're going to get inbound links. And as you say, by virtue of creating, say, rich content in the form of a YouTube video, we then can use that to be then creating the text pages on our site. So they all fit together well, but like you said, Miles, you need to keep an eye on what kind of content meets the objective of what you're trying to do. Is it inbound linking? Is it rich content? Is it rankings?
A question for Greg on this one, actually. If you create this type of content, say photos, do you make use of things like Flickr as distribution channels and obviously YouTube for video? And how far out do you sort of fan that distribution?
We don't use Flickr for any of our stuff, but we definitely utilize Pinterest and Instagram for certain people. It really kind of depends on the whole adage of, you got to be where your customers are. So, for a Harley dealership or an Audi or BMW guy, I would definitely go for the Instagram and Pinterest thing, but for a used car dealer, it doesn't necessarily apply. But, if it's a picture, you want to be on those visual sites. I've never had that much benefit from using Flickr. With video, we definitely want to put it on YouTube because it's highly searchable that way, but a lot of times we encourage people to use a third-party video hosting service. We typically use Wistia. Wistia is awesome because you're using their proprietary hosting, and then you get tons of really awesome analytics in those videos that you don't get through YouTube. And that, that's really useful when you're trying to figure out what kind of content you're creating in the future, because you can come back and see, okay, I made this 3-minute long video, and I can see for the last 5 3-minute long videos that I've put out, everybody leaves after 2 minutes. So, okay, in the future, I'm only going to make my videos 2 minutes long. Or, you can see that if you made a 3-minute video and everybody watched the section in the middle 2 or 3 times, then that's the important information. And then that can give you an idea to say, let me build on that content and create some more information about what people are obviously finding engaging in this video. So we're really big on a video kick. It's doing some really cool stuff lately.
Okay, great. And we'll leave that topic there. I'm going to move on. This one is called extreme localization. And I use the word extreme because I used the word advanced so many times during this series. I wanted to use something different. So what I really mean here is assume that everyone on the webinar understands the benefit or the importance of adding location terms into page titles and heading tags and putting their NAP on each page. What kind of going beyond that, if you want to kind of really localize your content down to, at least a city or a neighborhood level, what other kind of ideas and things do you utilize to kind of go beyond? Don, do you want to pick up that question?
Yeah, I guess 2 of the most common ones, one is in the video example that I talked about earlier, is to include a lot of localized information in that YouTube video. So making sure to include a link to the website in the description, making sure to include the business name and address and phone number, so the NAP information in that video, and then also creating the blog post. So that's one. Another is local pages. So for a lot of smaller businesses, I like to challenge them to think about, where are the 3 to 5 surrounding areas that you also get a lot of customers from, and create special pages just for those locations. So people from this town visit my office because we're close to this expressway and it's easy for them on their way back from work. And then, or maybe certain companies, right? If they work at Hewlett-Packard or something, you get a lot of customers from there. You can make very specific local pages with local directions for each of these areas. And you know where I think you have to be careful is some people will say, well, I have like 50 of them. It's like, no, I mean, realistically, what are the ones that you really get customers for? It's like usually 3 to 5 of these. It could be a little more, but I think those are 2 areas where we try to get very local content and like really optimized for those locations.
Okay, great. Greg, I guess it's the same question to you. What things do you think that move the needle when localizing content?
We really rely on just tons of blog content around that specific neighborhood or that small city. So we say, I mean, same kind of thing he said, we pick the surrounding areas, and if you're really going to go for that, you've got that location page on your site. Let's say you've got a branch there or whatever, and you've got that location page, and then that links over to all the blog posts that are about that specific area. So, when you're coming up with your content schedule and trying to figure out what you need to write, that's, earlier I mentioned we've got the 3 areas, and one of those areas is local content. And, we talk about local events, we talk about businesses in that area, we interview figures in that area. There's all sorts of tons of ideas, and a lot of people have talked about it in the question section. You just got to make sure that you're creating useful information about that area and putting it on your site, and then having a good link structure so that it's obvious that those pages are tied together, and that really helps. And then another big thing that we found is really useful is when most people are doing their link building, they're concentrating on their homepage or their product pages, and they forget to do link building towards these internal pages. And you don't need a ton of links, but a couple of links from local, if we're talking about a city that's, right next door to yours, and you're getting links from businesses that are in that city, then those are really relevant as far as local optimization. And so create that content, link it well, and then get a couple of links from that area, and it really makes a big difference.
Greg, do you have many businesses that have multiple dealerships in the same city? And what kind of conflict does that create when you're trying to give them all a fair shout at ranking locally, but they can essentially compete with each other? And how do you kind of manage the content for them?
We don't really ever have anyone where there's the same dealership in the same city, but you'll have like a Ford dealer group, and it'll be like in the metro area. You may have 5 or 6 dealerships, but they're all technically in separate cities, but they all want to go for the main metro. So they may all be, in suburbs, but they want to go for that main city. And, it's difficult, but if you're the agency and you're working for them, you say, okay, look, we're going to apply the same tactics to all the stores, and, after the pigeon update, whoever's closest to the city is probably going to be the one that's there. But, yeah, most of the time when we've got dealer groups, it's different brands. So it's, you'll have a Chevy store, and then you'll have, a Mazda store in another city and a Chrysler Jeep store in another city. So there's not really ever a situation where they're really trying to cannibalize each other too much.
Sure. Okay. Susan, did you want to pitch in on this?
Again, I think if we're looking at extreme type things, of course, I guess the kind of thing you might expect us to talk about would be tags in terms of geotags. It might be the information that's contained within the images themselves. I don't know if the guys would think, but I'm not entirely persuaded it has as much impact as people think it has. We're coming right back to the fact that we're back to core content. And I do know if you're working really hard with extreme localization, which again is this topic, I think that's where you have to start to use some killer techniques. And I do know the one that seems to work for us really well would be hijacking other events that are happening locally. So if something big is happening in the area, if you could then be commenting on it, interviewing people about it, all of a sudden you are positioning yourself in the center of that activity. But I don't know, what do the guys think about things like geotags and that kind of stuff in terms of really making a difference?
We study that very, very hard. We get every one of our different businesses are regional, so we get traffic with regional geo phrases, and we study where the people are coming from, and with all of the customers, ultimately we know their locations. And we have spent years working on creating domain authority for our sites so that they can ultimately include content and it will be seen, just what Susan said. I sort of have the feeling that's changing now with Google, and that the localization and the fact that who's ever closest to the location wins is becoming more important than domain authority. That's my gut. Is that what's happening now? I'm not 100% sure, but from a local business perspective, it's really important. In terms of local pages, we're putting titles on pages, and then we're doing as much as we can to focus on the 3, 4, or 5 towns, as Don had mentioned, that have the most potential customers or more.
Okay. Okay, great. Okay, we've got actually we're actually out of time. We've got one more sort of element on the agenda we'll look at. Just people are starting to sort of drop off. If you're still with us and you haven't put any of your own kind of content, local content ideas into the question module, please do. I really hope we can build up a great list here. So one little reminder for you there. We're just going to go, we're going to jump over content that converts because we have talked about a little bit already. The last bit we'll talk about is, resources and tools for kind of content creation. We've mentioned Sumo. I think Greg mentioned Wistia as a sort of video tool. But I might come to each of you in turn. Just say, are there 2 or 3 tools in your armory that you think our listeners should make use of and why they're useful? Don, I'm going to start with you. Any tools that you absolutely adore?
You caught me flat-footed here. You mean for content creation? I guess one of my favorite tools is ScreenFlow. You can make very, very fast and easy screencasts out of that. Somebody was asking in the comments earlier, how do you make those videos out of a PowerPoint slide? I actually use Keynote a lot on the Mac, and you can basically create a video out of that very quickly. You can do that with PowerPoint as well. And then in terms of content tools, yeah, I mean for content creation, WordPress, obviously. I guess is that the kind of tools you meant? Or?
Yeah, and it could be things for identifying spying competitors' content, assessing the quality of your own content, outreach opportunities. So the whole content creation, publishing, distribution sort of process. I can always come back to you, Don, if you want to have a quick think about that.
All right.
Okay. Dave, how about you? What tools do you like to make use of?
We're at the, I'd like to hear what other people say. We're not an agency. We're an operating business. We need to hear more of these great ideas and then try them. I'm not good at that.
Who doesn't want to duck the question? Greg.
I'll jump in. We've had a lot of success. A lot of businesses don't realize if they've got a search field on their website where you can, search for information on the website, you can turn on Google Analytics to look for what people are searching for. So then you can get into Google Analytics and see the questions that your own customers are asking on your website and what content they're looking for. And that typically shows you areas of content where either the content's too far buried in your site so that it's not easy to find, or it's content that you just don't have on your site that your customers want to know. And that's a super easy win-win because your customers are telling you what to write. And then Uber Suggest is really good, which is basically just automated Google autocomplete. You can see when you're typing in, the prevalent keywords that relate to your business, what other search queries are related to that inside of Google, and that's always super awesome. Another tool related to the whole content thing that we've really found useful is for anybody that's using WordPress, you want to make sure that you're doing something to let you set up what your open graph shares are going to look like so that you can control what Facebook, Google+, and LinkedIn shares look like, both when you share it and when other people share it. So if you guys are on WordPress, you should use the Open Graph Metabox plugin. That's the best one we found, and it allows you to choose what your description, what your link title, and what your photo is going to be when people share that content in Facebook, LinkedIn, and Google+. And so it really helps you make your stuff look pretty and be more shareable.
Great, thank you. Susan.
I would like to put my tools into 2 quick categories for you. I think the first set of tools would need to be, in terms of researching ideas, obviously the Google suite of tools, whether it be Google Trends or the Google Keyword Planner, are really useful if you're looking particularly with local phrases, what variations, what flavors of phrases are people actually searching for. The other research tool that I really like, of course, is SEMrush. I'm sure you're all familiar with SEMrush, that allows you to spy on your competitors, and you can get lovely nuggets using the SEMrush tool. There is a free version. There's also a paid-for version. So if you really want to have a good experiment, great place to start. And I think my 2 tips in terms of content generation, the first one I'd like to suggest is HubSpot makes available free PowerPoint templates for making your own infographics. So if you want some infographic templates, get into PowerPoint. There's some really useful little tools that you can use there. And the other one that I know we've had success with is in terms of time-lapse photography. And I think Dawn has alluded to this earlier. There are tools out there that if you want to create a video, what does my factory look like? What does it look like in my dentist office? I think the one that we've played with is called Hyperlapse. I'm trying to remember, but there are tools out there that they're freebies that just let you play with creating this kind of content.
Yeah, the iPhone is probably one of the best tools, right? There's just so you can create content on the spot, edit it, and publish it all right there with some of those tools. Hyperlapse, Instagram.
Okay, great. Guys, thank you very much. Last bit of the webinar was called Hidden Gems, which is basically where you guys get to reveal your best-kept secrets about content. I'm sure we've heard most of those already, but maybe we'll just do a sort of final sort of parting comments. Why don't we go in reverse order? So, Susan, you were last time, so why don't you go last this time? What would be a sort of parting comment you'd like to leave the listeners?
I think in terms of my secret gem for tonight, I think the best thing in terms of content creation for local SEO is to have really good listening tools. I mentioned earlier about spying on your competitors, listening to what's going out. There are a lot of these tools out there, whether it be Google Alerts, whether it's social mention, whether it's using other services, but I think keeping an eye on what are people in the locality talking about that you can then leverage for your own local SEO campaigns. So my secret gem would have to be listening tools.
Wonderful, thank you. Don.
Yeah, so I have two things. One is I think overall I think that content creation is only valuable if you can do it consistently over time. And so figuring out a way to do this and get your businesses, your clients into a rhythm where you've set it up for them to make it easy so that this is coming out regularly over time is super important. In terms of tools, you know, a couple of gems back to Susan's point about like trying to listen in on what's going on. There's a tool on it's an iPhone app called Perch. That's kind of cool. You can set up businesses, like put in a business name and then monitor the stream of everything that's being said about that business. And so you can do this for if one of your clients, you can do it for their competitors. You'll see what people are sharing on Instagram, see what they're posting on Foursquare.
Right.
It's a neat little tool. There's also a tool called BrightLocal that does a similar thing, and basically you can put in a business address and the stream of everything that's being shared out there will show up. And so those are a couple of tools to monitor what's going on about a business or your competitors.
Okay, great. Greg.
There's some cool things that we've done with, there's a service called Page2 RSS, like PAGE, the number 2 RSS, that converts any website page into an RSS feed that then allows you to check that feed. It kind of relates back to what Susan was saying about monitoring your competitors, monitoring the local area. You know, set up Page2 RSS and then create an if this then that trigger that sends you that information or drops that information into Evernote, and then once a week you can come back and check that Evernote document or multiple Evernote documents and see, hey, what your competitors are doing, you know, what's going on in your city, that sort of thing. And you know, if you can have these listening tools and figure out ways to use tools like if this then that to automate that stuff and cache it for you, then it's not like you're constantly having to go use a tool manually. It's creating all of this stuff for you automatically, and then you can just come check it, you know, once a week, once a month, whenever you've got to go in and get those ideas for content. And that streamlines it, makes it a little bit easier.
Okay, great. And Dave.
We're the small businesses. We're not the agencies. I put my hat on. I put my thinking hat on for the different businesses every day. And we talk with people, and then we churn through ideas, take notes, and then we try them out with our staff and other people. trying to come up with things all the time. We're actually putting our thinking hat on at every moment. 15 minutes before we sat down for the introductory discussion, I went outside. I'm at that business right now. It's in the food and beverage business. I stopped off at a coffee place. There was a pie guy there. We all started speaking. There was some rich conversation. After this, I'm going to go back and rethink about the things we were talking about, the three people in the food business. Maybe there's something there. Maybe there isn't. But if you're the business and you're working with any one of these wonderful people in any agency, you should be helping them. You should be thinking about your own business and throwing ideas back and forth, because you're the one that gets the income, and it's really incumbent upon you to keep thinking about this and keep working through it to try and come up with better and better ideas. We do it every day. That's about the best I can come up with.
No, that's great, and it's lovely to have that kind of different perspective from you this evening, Dave. It's been great. So, guys, that is it. A very, very big thank you to the four of you. As Dave has said many times, he was learning and listening, writing stuff down. I've learned an awful lot as well. I'm sure our listeners have. It's been a really, really information-rich webinar. Lots of great suggestions, ideas, and tips we can go away and execute on. We're going to have a great write-up of this webinar because there is so much information to go out. Hopefully got lots of local content ideas. We've got lots of tools that we can share. So off the back of this one webinar, we'll hopefully have 2 or 3 pieces of content to put on our site. But that's all down to you guys for sharing your time and expertise. So I can't thank you enough for being with us today. I really do appreciate it. For everyone else, so also thank you to Linda and Colin for no doubt their probably fingers are kind of warm to the bone for sharing links and typing answers back to people. So a big thanks to you guys as ever for your sterling efforts. We have another webinar in February, which is looking at advanced keyword strategies for local search. That happens on the 25th of Feb. We are about to announce the March to July series. We've got I think another 6 or 7 webinars lined up. We're going to lock that down tomorrow and release that, so please stay tuned for more Inside Local webinars. But again, thank you to everyone who has participated. Thank you to everyone who has shared their ideas. Thank you to everyone who has just listened and hopefully enjoyed it. Have a great day wherever you are, and hope to see you on Inside Local very, very soon. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.